Everyone, thank you all for coming out for our Meet the Candidates event. As you probably know, we have 3 candidates running for 2 seats this year. Our vote is on Tuesday, May 21st. Doors are open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., located right in the upper gym here at the high school. We hope you all can make it out. Those who potentially have not voted in one of our elections before, just so you know, we have open registration. So if you haven't before, just come that day, bring your ID with you. You just need to be 18 years of age and a resident of the district for 30 days. So your ID should prove your address, and we can verify all that information on hand. We can get you into our poll books. Very simple and easy. We hope to have a great turnout that day. And I'm going to hand it over to the League of Women Voters now to introduce themselves, explain how tonight is going to go, and get on with introducing our candidates for this year's election. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone, for coming out. It's good to see that we've got participation in government going on here in terms of you having the ability to ask questions of the candidates before you and get the answers you need in order to be well-informed when you go to the polls. We are happy that we got invited to do this with the Bethlehem School District. We've done this for many years, and we're just really pleased to see that this process is in place. I'm going to now turn it over to our moderator, who is quite the seasoned moderator, Nell, and she's going to come up and introduce the candidates and let you know about the rules. Thank you all for coming.
Good evening. My name is Nell Stokes. I live in Selkirk. My school district is Ravenna, Selkirk, Queens. So I have no interest in this particular school district right here, which is why I'm able to moderate this evening. I have rules for our activities this evening so that we can all understand how we're supposed to proceed. The general rules are no campaign material, campaign signs, buttons, and T-shirts or demonstrations for or against any candidate. Cell phones must be turned off or placed on vibrate. Only approved media can record or photograph during the forum. Audience is informed to the format of the rules. They will withhold applause until after all candidates have made their closing remarks. No applause at opening statements or no applause during Q&A period. The candidates can distribute their campaign material after their closing statements have been made. We have placed with the candidates 2 red cards. In the event that they choose to use those, they can speak for an additional 1 minute on a question by raising the red card. You have 2 red cards, and it gives you 2 extra minutes, 1 at a time. Okay? The candidates may use physical notes, but are prohibited from referring to their cell phones or other electronic devices during this forum. The candidates have been chosen by pulling a number from a cup. And I will rotate the questions accordingly for their responses. And we have with us this evening Mr. Brendan Mccann, Mr. Jonathan Fishbein, and Ms. Wendy Sampson. And if we're all set, we're ready to get started. And they know their number, so they will do their introduction at this time. Thank you so much. You can do it there if you want.
Do it from here.
There's a mic there. If you want to stand up, fine.
Seated? Okay.
Oh, I'll do that. I'm sorry, I neglected to do that. During your questioning, you have 2 minutes to answer each question, and we have timers here that will hold the cards up to let you know when your time is up. And so you just pay attention to that and act accordingly. And I apologize. I knew I'd mess up. But we're all here together. We're doing this well. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and the administration for facilitating this event, and to those in the audience, both here and that will end up seeing it online. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Jonathan Fishbein, and I'm running for my second term on the Bethlehem Central Board of Education. I'm currently employed as the General Counsel for the New York State Division of Veterans Services, where I have the honor of helping veterans get the benefits and services they earn through their service to our country. Prior to this, I was an appellate attorney in private practice dedicated to defending the innocent, and believe it or not, I was a competitive ice dancer for about 3 years. I have been a resident of Bethlehem since 1991. My wife of 26 years, Paula, is a speech pathologist who has taught in all 6 of the district's elementary schools, now down to 5. Our son, a 2013 Bethlehem graduate, was on the high school cross-country team, played tuba in the All-State Orchestra, and is a 2017 St. Lawrence University graduate. Our daughter, a 2016 Bethlehem graduate, acted in Stage 700, Theater Without a Net, middle and high school musicals, and is currently a junior at SUNY Plattsburgh. I believe that a quality education is a priority, regardless of whether a student struggles for every grade or gets almost effortless A's. When looking for a place to call home and to raise a family, we look no further than Bethlehem because of the district's reputation for academic excellence, and we've never looked back. The quality of education our children received in Bethlehem has served them well in college and beyond, and if I am reelected to the school board for my second term, my promise to the community is to pay it forward and maintain the standard of education for all. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brendan Mccann. I do recognize a lot of faces here. If you don't know me, I do work in town. I own Perfect Blend Cafe and Twisted Vine in the Four Corners. However, before that, to give you a brief background on myself, I was born and raised in Albany. I have an older brother, also a Del Mar resident, who has 3 boys, all in or planning to be in Del Mar schools. My wife and I have moved to Del Mar in 2011, and one of the biggest reasons that we moved here was because we knew we were going to start a family, and the district had such a great reputation for education and a very reputable school district. I attended Christian Brothers Academy, graduated in 2000, and also attended Siena College and graduated in 2004 with a business degree in marketing and management with a focus in entrepreneurship. From there, I had a job in Saratoga working for a commercial real estate company in which we worked on many projects for larger wire carriers throughout the mid-Atlantic states. So I have a lot of experience with budgetary issues, meeting timelines, planning and whatnot, and working with local municipalities. From there, in 2008, a good friend of mine and I opened Perfect Blend Cafe, and we've been there now almost 11 years, at which time the most surprising thing that we've encountered is how big a part of the community that we've became and how rewarding that is. So I've forged a lot of relationships with certain organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, in which received the Businessman of the Year Award in 2011, and worked with many other organizations throughout the town. I have 2 children. My daughter is a kindergarten at Slingerlands, and my son will be starting 3-year-old pre-K next year. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to run for Board of Education in our great town, and hope that I can answer a lot of your questions this evening.
Good evening. Let me add my thank yous to the district for hosting, the League of Women Voters for facilitating, and to all of you in the audience for being here tonight or watching later. My name is Wendy Sampson, and I'm running for school board because I believe in keeping Bethlehem schools strong, and I will work to keep improving educational programs and opportunities for all of our students. Last year, Bethlehem was one of more than 30 upstate school districts that did not have enough candidates to fill open board seats. That is why I ran as a write-in candidate. This year, I am officially on your ballot. My relationship with the school system began back in 1987 when I was completing my teacher training courses at the University at Albany. I worked with longtime high school teacher Robert Feldman, who happened to be a college friend of my own high school English teachers from Johnson City, New York. It's a small world, indeed. My husband and I chose to live here because of the quality of schools in this community. Our 14-year-old daughter, Nora, attended Hammergrail and the middle school and now is in 9th grade. She is an artist, she plays in the band, she plays ultimate frisbee, some recreational soccer. She has a great time. I understand education issues from the perspective of an educator, a parent, and a taxpayer, as we've lived in Bethlehem for 29 years. I support teachers because I was one for over 20 years. I also have experience as a board member, as I have served 6 years on a daycare center board in downtown Albany and 15 years on the Cornerstone Campus Ministry Board at the University at Albany. In full disclosure, I served a few years on the board of Albany County League of Women Voters as well. Should I be elected, I will step down from those other board positions because this would become my priority. It would be an honor to give back to this community that I have called home for more than half my life. Thank you.
That was perfect. I don't believe they stayed home yesterday to practice 2 minutes because they each nailed it. Thank you so much. I just need to say that the league has, the league and the school district, the school district has gotten the questions through a news article that they submitted. And we have lots of questions, as you can see on the table. And I have lots of questions right here. And so we're going to start with our questions. We just want the candidates to remember that they have 2 minutes on each question. And the timers are right there. And they also have 2 red cards that they can use in case they have a desire to answer further on a particular question. So we'll get started with our questions right now. And we're going to do this on a rotating basis. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, then we'll go 2, 3, 1, and then we go that way, okay? And I have it written down, so hopefully it'll be perfect. So the first question is, what is the most important item that needs to be improved to benefit Bethlehem Central School District students, and how do you intend to work towards it in the coming term?
There are many issues that need to be addressed, and picking one of them is difficult, but I will give it a stab. Bullying at any time, at any place in the school or any place else is unacceptable. It's something that we have No Place for Hate in the school, and we have other programs that address this issue, but it's something that still needs to be addressed on a regular and ongoing basis. So if I had to pick one, that would be it.
Mr. Mccann.
I agree with Jonathan that there are many issues, and it could be tough to pick one in particular, where I don't think there's anything too glaring, as the school district does a great job with so many of the issues and problems that they might be faced with on a regular basis. One thing as an employer in town and working with several high school students over the past 5, 10 years as employees, I believe that focusing on having them ready for real-world, real-life experiences through certain programs that they have available to them in school can be very beneficial. A lot of the kids that we've seen, that we've hired, or that we know through certain community functions and such, notice that their career readiness is not as great as maybe it should be. And having the opportunity to work with them and sort of help train them and prepare them for what the real world has become in, the 21st century, has been a great success of mine, I think, and something that I look forward to. And I think that that's something that could be worked on through programs like the CT Pathway Program, which I was lucky enough to sit in on an external audit for about a month or so ago. I think just having options for the students in the high school age, especially, to have more readiness for the real world is something that is very important for them moving forward in life.
Thank you. Ms. Sampson.
Okay, they both touched upon some pretty important issues. Bullying is certainly something that we always have to keep an eye on. But I would think one of the issues that I would like to see improved in our district is students' ability to recognize truth from fiction in certainly online exchanges and social media. Some reports have shown up recently how American students are falling behind in learning about things like the Holocaust and the actual reasons for the Civil War. So there's a lot of information out there, and our students need to be a little bit more literate in the information world and try to figure out, how to do a little bit of research and a little bit of, stick-to-itiveness to find out the actual answers to questions.
Thank you. Our second question goes first to Mr. Fishbein. Didn't move over, did I? It goes first to Mr. Mccann. He's number 2, so he goes first the second time. And the question is, the Bethlehem School District is pretty well known for high-achieving students academically and athletically. What about the rest of the students? How will you support the special education program and/or work to support diversity within the district?
I think that is a great question because oftentimes you'll see at local awards things, like most recently the Chamber of Commerce presented a student here with a great award for all that she has done in school, very much well-deserved. And the YMCA recognized a lot of young leaders for things that they've done within their school, but special education is extremely important. And I have a few family members and friends whose students are special needs students, and I think that it's important that knowing that special education for those types of students is really also an issue for the parents at home. A lot of what those students need is going to come from home, and it can be very difficult for those parents at home to kind of manage everyday life, plus the needs of their student at home and in school. So the resources that the district provides, not only for the student, but for the parents, can be very important, because I think it helps to bridge that gap to kind of help the student ultimately feel more comfortable in school and also to feel more comfortable in their surroundings. Whether they ultimately can find themselves with classmates not in a special needs group, or if that's what they need to continue to do all the way up through 12th grade.
Thank you. Ms. McCann.
Ms. Sampson?
I'm getting there.
Are you getting it?
Ms. Sampson. I'll get it right in a minute.
It's okay.
It's like I moved over, I crossed out my numbers, and now I have to cross out my names. Okay. So we're at Ms. Sampson to answer
All right,
this question.
thank you. We often find parents that we know having to be real advocates for their special needs students. And that puts everybody in a really uncomfortable position, because we should be working much harder to ensure that these students feel included and have all of their opportunities presented to them, instead of having to see students or parents fight really hard as advocates for their students. I know that we've implemented some earlier intervention programs and some methods to identify special needs students earlier, to get them help they need sooner. So that is an area that we'll keep working and improving, I'm sure. And as far as struggling students, there's also students who are maybe not straight A students all the time, or they struggle with certain things. And I taught, when I was teaching, I taught for over 20 years, and many years I taught at the Glenmont Job Corps Center over in Glenmont, and a lot of those students were failed by their public education system. And they were not successful in regular school programming. So as long as students are aware that they can get help and can get help, we need to, keep encouraging students to make sure that they're doing everything they can and make sure that our teachers are aware of who needs help.
Thank you. Now I think I'm on track. Mr. Fishbein.
Generally, I think that from my experience on the board, we do a decent job of addressing the needs of special needs children. However, because I'm married to a speech pathologist who works in the district, I know that she and others work basically their entire vacations on doing the paperwork and the other things that are necessary to do their jobs properly. They put a tremendous amount of time in. I think that we need more support in that area so that the teachers have the time to do what they need to do. But I also think that more often than not, we don't do as good a job in the middle. We have AP courses and other options for the really smart kids. We have students special needs that are generally taken care of. Yes, parents have to advocate, but parents in the middle also have to advocate, and they do. We have the lab school. It's a gem of the community, and that is a place that is unique, and it is something that is for the kids in the middle. We have technology and coding and other opportunities. We just approved the CTE program so that students have other options to graduate. CTE allows them to take 4 regents and the CTE program, and so long as they have enough hours, they get the regents diploma with that certification. So we are looking at new ways and better ways of getting our students educated, because not every child is going to go to college. Some are going to go elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. And our third question goes first to Ms. Sampson. Got it right that time, huh? Surprised you. What specific action should the district take in managing school safety?
Okay, well, right now, we've recently instituted a Raptor program for all visitors into the school, and I think that's very important to make sure that we know who's coming and going in all of our buildings at all times. I know that the school also has safety drills and go home early drills and all kinds of drills that are practiced for any kind of situation that might come up. With everything that we're already doing, I mean, I'm really not sure if there's even more things that could be done. It's just, the kind of world that we live in, you have to be prepared for all kinds of things, and we're taking very good measures to ensure the safety of our students. Some of the cameras on the buses, I believe, are being, some of the buses are having cameras as well to make sure that those areas are safe. I think we're moving in the right direction. I'm at a loss, though, to think of anything additional that that we might be able to do
Okay, thank you so much.
on the spot like this.
Thank you. Mr. Fishbein.
The issue of safety is something that I experienced firsthand this morning because I became part of the Raptor program, so I can tell you one thing that should be changed. I forgot my badge to attend a meeting this morning, and I became part of the Rafter program. I put my license in the device, and it kicked out a sticky label, which I put on my jacket coat. By the time I got down to the office I was going to, the label was coming off. So the one thing I think we can do is get labels that are a little stickier. One thing I would not like to see is the situation that's unfolding in Saratoga Springs right now, where the Saratoga board voted not to allow the monitors to carry guns in the school. There is now a campaign to put guns in the school. I'm very much against guns in the school. I think that we have police officer in the schools. We don't need more. And regardless of where you stand on guns, I don't own them. I've shot them. I have a healthy respect for them. I work with veterans who also have healthy respect for weapons. But school is not the place for them. So I hope we never get there.
Thank you. Mr. McCann.
I tend to agree with both of the other candidates on a few things. I do think that the district, in my knowledge, has done a very good job with safety as a whole. I don't believe that guns belong in schools. I do think, though, that maybe the most appropriate measure in an ever-changing world is just to continually be ever-changing as a school district. And I mean that to say there's always something different that could happen from a safety perspective. So being prepared and planning and interacting with the parents as much as possible to make sure that the message is getting through to their sons and daughters and students at the schools is paramount. A lot of times with the way technology operates and how easily accessible some of the horrific things that do happen in schools, around the country and around the world are to obtain, I think it's important that the school can really relate the importance of the safeties, any procedures that maybe have changed or need to get changed because of, some new safety measure or preparedness, that it really relates to the student and their families as a whole. And that could be a discussion as a whole so that, everybody's on the same page, whether it's at school or, on your way home from school, if you walk or ride, or if you take a bus home, because safety for students is just not within the walls, of their respective schools, but is also, riding their bike home or a walk home or, a bus ride home. And being pretty much a resident of the Four Corners, we see a lot of students coming and going early in the morning and later in the evening after school, and we service a lot of students too in our shops, and their safety, like I said, just isn't at school. It can be after school, so there's a lot of things to consider, and I think it's paramount that the board and the school district takes into account those things.
Thank you. Question number 4. So we're back at number 1, Mr. Fishbein. And the question is, what is your opinion of the use of electronics, iPads, Chromebooks, etc., in the younger elementary years? Do you believe in more or less screen time?
First, I'd have to say that generally, I think that screen time is overall overdone. Many of us spend too much time at screen time. I have a recollection of a friend who got on the telephone, said nothing to this girl he was talking to. It was a teenager, and they were on the phone about an hour. Father gets off. Father says to him, "Boy, she must have talked your ear off." He said, "No, she didn't say a word." They sat on the phone for an hour. They didn't know how to talk to each other. Screen time is something that in our youth, in elementary schools, even in middle school, is something that is good, and it can be used by teachers creatively, and we have programs in which that occurs. But generally, screen time, I think, especially at younger years, should be limited. Our children were the last kids in their classes. I believe Ben was in 7th or 8th grade before he got a cell phone. And this is when pretty much everybody else had one. And we didn't want him to have that, and we limited the computer time in the house because we knew that this was not the best place to learn. It is a good place to learn. Don't get me wrong. I very much like what we have done as a school district with the Power of One and getting Chromebooks and other devices out. But limiting screen time is vital to our children's health.
Thank you. Mr. Mccann.
Thank you. I think this is a really great question and a very important question in, our current school system and basically the way technology operates now. Screen time is, I'm guilty of using too much of it, as I'm sure most of us are. However, I do think it is overused, and as a parent of a almost 6-year-old and an almost 3-year-old, it's a constant battle at my house as to when it is enough. As it relates to school, I do believe that technology can really only help our kids to learn more things and to learn them in a better way because it's something that they can easily relate to. And whether you're for screen time or not, if you are a proponent of using smartphones and tablets and whatnot, I'd say the majority of kids nowadays can easily relate to how to use them and how to operate them and how to get what they need to out of them. I'm interested to learn a little bit more about that in terms of any studies that the district has done on what is the appropriate amount of time for using them in school. I know my daughter, as a kindergartner, loves the time that they get to use and learn on them at school. I do think the issue might be more of when they get out of school, how much more they have to use it and how that affects certain things like sleep patterns and behavior. But as far as it relates to technology within the classroom, I think it can be a benefit.
Thank you. Ms. Sampson.
This is a very, fine line between how much screen time is too much and how much is too little. As far as in the early elementary grades, I don't think that kids should have as much access as they do already. It's very hard to control that at home. Our daughter didn't use a small tablet or a game until she was well over, I think she was 6 I think she was 6 when we got her first little game thing. So it's not anything that younger kids should have too much exposure to. All the studies indicate that it's not great to have electronics in the hands of students under 5 or 6. As they're learning and reading and they get to kindergarten, they're 5 and they're turning 6, and they're going to learn in the classroom. They're going to use a Chromebook, they're going to use other devices, and those are all very well and good for educational purposes. But as they get to be teenagers, it is hard to get them to limit their time on the screen. And they talk to each other, they instant message each other, they send each other memes and all kinds of things. And that kind of communication is something that, as a parent, you do have to monitor a little bit, or a lot, depending on how much you can trust your student. And again, they're being bombarded with all kinds of information and influences. So, we really do have to draw a fine line and maybe do some more studying of how these electronic devices affect our students' learning and affect their ability to function, in having regular conversations with people. And, if they can go away a week of summer camp and not have electronics, all the more power to them.
Thank you. All right, question number 5 goes to Mr. Mccann first. Our school district did a survey of students, and the result included a request for a later high school start time. The science is clear that it would benefit our high school students' physical and mental health. We have a committee looking into it for our district. What is your view of later high school start times?
I don't particularly have an opinion one way or the other, as I don't know what the study evaluated and whatnot. I do know, speaking from personal experience, that a later start time is a little bit more beneficial. I think that sometimes now, and I notice this with a lot of students that have worked with me, it seems that at the earlier hours, especially when they're working on the weekends or something, they have a lot to manage aside from just being in school. So given an extra, say, hour or so in the morning to kind of get themselves together, plan their days, plan their agendas, follow up on any sort of assignments or things like that that they might be responsible for, might be more beneficial. As far as it affects them behaviorally or from a health perspective and how that relates to their schooling, I can't say that I can clearly speak to that, but I'm certainly interested to finding out more about it.
Thank you. Ms. Sampson.
Thank you. I've been interested in this issue since last year, actually, when I found out that the school district was going to do some studies, and there is the committee, and I am all on board with a later start time at the high school. All of the studies indicate that students perform better, they're less likely to get injured at athletics when they get better sleep, and teenagers' sleep patterns are different. Adolescents are programmed to fall asleep later. It's just their biology, it's just their nature, and every study that has been done on school districts that have instituted later start times, even a half hour later, there is much better, there's much improved student performance, and there's much better athletic participation and less chance of injury in sports. So many other school districts in our area are also studying this. Guilderland is, Niskayuna is, and I think that Bethlehem should be at the forefront of this movement. We should not be reactionary. We should definitely, do all that we can to figure out if this is going to be feasible for our district. And if it is, I think that our students will be served better for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fishbein.
Starting school later would have benefited me, certainly. But the issue now is, I think, and this is a personal, I want to be clear, I'm speaking for myself personally, not as a sitting member of the board. I believe that starting school later is something that we need to do. The question really is, how do we get there? And part of the process is figuring out how do you do bus runs when you switch around a high school schedule maybe with the elementary school. How does it affect parents? How do we get buy-in from all of the different stakeholders that are affected? It affects work after school, it affects scheduling of sports, and this is not to say that this would stop us from going forward with this kind of program. It's just to say we have issues that we have to address. I think it's possible. I think it's something that we need to do. We must do for the health of our children. The science is undeniable. But the question is, how do you get all the ducks in a row to make it work? And that's why we have a committee. That's why we are in the process, the board is in the process of, we have hired a company to look at the bus runs as a first start to see what our options are, and then look to see from that how best, if we are going to do it, how best to orchestrate it. We also have to integrate ourselves with the other districts because of sports. So it's not an easy thing to do, but it's something I think we need to do and must do for the health of our children.
Thank you so much. Question number 6 goes to Ms. Sampson first. What will you do to ensure an education at Bethlehem schools include diverse voices from women, minorities, and other marginalized groups?
That's a very excellent question. I was just looking today at some statistics that show that by U.S. News and Report and their own ranking of school districts, we are 87th in the state of New York. That we're in the top 100 as far as a lot of things go. And we're number 917 nationally. So out of the thousands and thousands of school districts, what do we have going for us that keeps us on the top? And we have great academic programs, and we have great sports teams, and we have all kinds of great things. But when you go in and look at the demographics of the district, we got a C+ in diversity. And we don't have a lot of people who are different, actually, in this district. We're working hard, I'm sure, to attract that and to welcome people in the community and to make them feel like this is a great place to be, because it is a great place to be. My daughter has friends of all kinds, and what we should probably do is maybe reach out to the community more, or reach out. Students have a lot of good programs. There's a great No Place for Hate program. But students could certainly be, a little. How do you make your district more diversified? It's a good question, but I'm certain that we can make all of our students feel comfortable. I think we're working hard at doing that, and certainly I see a lot of very polite and happy students. So I'm sure that another club or another. Okay.
We're stopping it at another, huh?
That's okay. Another program
Thank you so
is
much.
certainly going to be helpful. Another club.
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Fishbein.
Would you repeat the question, please?
Of course. What will you do to ensure an education at Bethlehem schools includes diverse voices from women, minorities, and other marginalized groups? And let me just say this before you start. When the stop sign comes up, if you're in the middle of a sentence, you can finish it, okay?
I think this question brings forth an issue that's not well understood, and that is that the board doesn't set the agenda or the academic agenda of the school. That's the job of the superintendent. The board would supervise the superintendent, and the board has certain authority to create programs. But generally, all of this comes from the administration. It's not something that the board generally gets involved with. However, having said that, I'm not sure that there's a lack of voices of women, because most of the teachers are women until you get into the high school, and even then, the majority, I understand, are still women. As far as minorities, one of the things I've looked at in this community since I've been here is that if you want to fix a diversity problem, you have to have a community that is livable for everybody. And some of that has to do with the cost of living in this town. It is not inexpensive. Until we had the 2% tax cut, and I know it's not 2%, it's a formula that they called 2%. But until we had that, I remember my taxes, my school and property taxes went up on average 5% a year. We're doing better at keeping control, but still, in order to get a more diverse population, we need places for that population to move into. And until we do that, it's going to be very hard to get the kind of diversity that I think we all wish for and want in our community.
Thank you so much.
I tend to agree with the last thing Jonathan said, and when Nell had read the question, the first thing I wrote down in my notes here is that it's maybe more of a community-based question. You know, it's tough for the district to say what type of diversity or people are going to be living in their district. However, as far as an education they'll receive or how they'll be treated at school, to me is very simple. From a student-to-student level, they need to treat others as they want to be treated. And as educators and administration, they need to make sure that the programs and sort of the discipline amongst the administration is in place to do so. You know, it is, again, a world where the kids are exposed to a lot of different things, and for the administration and the students to understand, you know, what's right and wrong and how certain people associate themselves amongst the, you know, their peers, it's very important. And, you know, it's important that each student and administrator or faculty or staff, you know, supports inclusion as opposed to, you know, not knowing or not being prepared or planned for, you know, these sorts of issues that pop up.
Thank you very much. And so we're at question number 7, which brings us back to participant number 1. How should teacher performance be measured? What are some of the challenges inherent in evaluating teachers?
Save the easy questions. Part of the problem with evaluating teachers or evaluating anyone is the metrics you're using. At one point, we were using how well did our students test. The problem in part was that you would end up with a teacher who was a stellar teacher in one community, move them to a different school or a different school district, and because of where those students were, the teacher ended up being a poor teacher. That's not the way you measure a teacher. Teachers teach students, but not all students learn. Not all students learn it the same way. Not every student comes from the same set of parents. So some kindergartners will come into kindergarten with a 100-word vocabulary. Others will come in with a 5,000-word vocabulary. And the issue becomes, how do you measure? I honestly don't know how you measure. This is a problem that the state has tried to come up with answers. Not one of them has worked so far that I can see. I think the fairest way is to have superintendent, maybe supervisors, peers go in to the classroom and watch the teacher in action. Teach. How do they teach? How do they use teachable moments? It's the kind of thing that is, well, they've been trying to develop it now as long as I have been married to a wife that's in the school district, and I don't know that they've ever really gotten it right. I think they have gotten close by the observations, but that's about it.
Thank you. Mr. Mccann.
This is definitely an area I'd be interested to learn more in. However, my opinion on it, and in reading part of the strategic plan that was just proposed, there was a focus on the wellness aspect of the students and faculty, where the wellness of, you know, the faculty administration, the teachers, you know, would help to promote better attendance and better well-being while they're in class. However, evaluating the teachers on a consistent basis is somewhat of a moving target, I believe. So drawing from personal experience where I'm constantly evaluating, say, someone that works with me or for me, or relationships that I have within the industry, you're constantly doing an audit of sorts of their behavior, of their attendance, and of whatever their end product is. In this case is how well the students are doing and how well the students receive the education that they're being taught from the educator. So while I think it's a moving target and could be somewhat difficult, having, you know, audits, you know, somewhat more regularly might help, give those in charge, the board, the superintendent, more insight into what they do on a daily basis, because I don't think overall the grades that you're going to pull out of a class are an indicator if it's a great teacher or they're doing a poor job. I think just more dialogue and whatnot is probably the best case to keep an eye on how the educators do within the district.
Thank you. Ms. Sampson.
All right, teacher evaluation is a moving target, as the other two gentlemen in the room have noticed. But I did used to be a teacher. I spent 20 years teaching, and I was evaluated in many different kinds of ways because I worked in public schools, I worked for a private entity, and I taught in the prison system as well. So basically, teachers are best evaluated by their administrators through observation and through improving their own progress, evaluating themselves, self-reflection on what they're doing, and only a little, I mean, you do have to look at student performance, but a lot of things go into that. And I'm not talking about just test scores, because in my day job, I do work at state ed, and I see a lot of different things from many different sides. And we can't evaluate teachers just based on student test performance. That's very unfair. Maybe a small percent, 5% maybe, very small. But yes, if students are not learning, you have to get to the bottom of that. You have to understand why and help that teacher improve. I'm a big fan of mentoring programs, other teachers, experienced teachers, spending time with new teachers and making sure that they're getting off on the right foot and they're working hard and given an opportunity to improve if that's needed. And also, I'm a big fan of allowing teachers to do cross-examinations, like cross-visits with other educators. And have a lot of collaboration on what they're doing, because teachers are good with each other if they have conversations and work together with another peer as often as part of this mentoring kind of program.
Thank you. We have question number 8, and we're going to start with Mr. Mccann this time. What will the schools do to increase language learning at the elementary level?
I think just having it being offered to them and stressing the importance of that, I've said it before, that ever-changing world that we live in. It's more diversified day by day, where having a secondary language is very important. I'm the son of an Italian immigrant. My mother came here when she was 10 years old. She didn't speak the language very well, probably till she was in her late teens, along with her brothers and sisters. And I also took foreign language, Spanish in particular, for about 13 years, from kindergarten all the way through into my education in college. So I believe it's very important, and it's only going to help to further a child's education, primarily at a younger age when kids soak up everything like sponges. It's a lot easier to learn another language, and I know my daughter was even starting to learn it in preschool, which I'm a strong advocate for. I think it needs to be in the forefront of their curriculum. While I know the board doesn't really decide on curriculum, I do think it's an important aspect of what they need to learn, just because it is going to be so important for them as they grow up and when they get out of school.
Thank you. Ms. Sampson.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. What will the schools do to increase language learning at the elementary level?
Okay, I'm going to interpret that to mean introduction to learning a foreign language at the elementary level. And my interpretation of that would be the earlier they learn a second language, the better. All the studies show that earlier in their education experience, if they're exposed to a foreign language, they're going to pick it up much faster. That's common, that's, I don't know if it's common knowledge, but that's how it is. Offering students a foreign language in the middle school is a good idea, but if they had had the opportunity to start that maybe in 3rd or 4th grade, they would be much farther along. And learning other languages is very important in this world because it's a big world out there, and many students speak many. If you can speak another language, you are much more apt to be hired, and many different career opportunities will arise if you are, efficiently speaking proficient in another language, is what I'm trying to say here. That's my interpretation of the question. So any opportunities we can give kids to have exposure to a secondary language in an elementary school setting would be welcome. I think that's a good way to go.
Thank you. Mr. Fishbein?
I would have to agree that a second or third language is just one of the best things we can do for our children. I know that I was told when I graduated from law school that if I spoke Spanish, I could basically double my salary starting out. I did not speak Spanish. I didn't start learning a language until 7th grade, and because of scheduling by 9th grade, I was put into an advanced course that there was no way I was going to survive. So my experience with language wasn't good. My children had a better experience here, but even that, from all the studies and from their experience, you really have to start early. And if you start at kindergarten, you have the best chance of having a bilingual child. The problem is that we keep adding and adding and adding things to the curriculum, and in a top-down manner. So the question is, what do you want to add? And if you want to add something, what do you take away? And if you're not going to take away something, you're going to have to add hours to the school day. Now, the U.S. has one of the shortest number of learning hours in a school year of any developed country. But if you're going to add, and there are lots of things we can add. We can add coding. Coding is another form of language. We could add coding in kindergarten. Kindergarten kids can do coding. There's a coding caterpillar. But how much can we put on children of that age without giving them a proper recess? And again, everything you add, you've got to figure out how you're going to get it into the schedule, and then how are you going to pay for it?
Thank you. So we're on to question number 9, and it's going to go to Ms. Sampson. Anxiety and depression among young people are on the rise at an alarming rate. What can the district do to help students?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I was just alarmed by statistics that indicate that 22% of young adults will face a mental illness or an addiction crisis in their lifetime. And that's a huge number. That's almost 1 out of 4 or 5 students. And I don't want to look at a group of kids and say which one of you is going to have the mental health breakdown, or which one of you is going to have an anxiety attack, or which one of you is going to feed into that statistic. The new strategic plan that has come out shows a commitment to the emotional well-being of our students. And I think that implementing things like perhaps a peer counseling program, perhaps letting students know better what their mental health options are. I think there's students who might go to counselors thinking that they need, thinking that they're going to get great advice about where to go to college, but they might not have anybody that they can talk to at that moment if it's a crisis moment. So making students aware of the programs that are available for them might be one good thing we could do. And another thing is that we might be able to offer, some schools have have a drop-in center for students where they can go if they're having a crisis moment, and they can get it, they can get advice right then and there, whether it's from a peer or a professional like a social worker. I think we're adding another social worker at the middle school. That's a great idea. Those kids will have somebody to talk to, perhaps. I don't know how the scheduling would be for that. But, sometimes you just, you need a place to go. And guidance counselors have one set of jobs, but psychologists and people who can talk to them about their mental well-being is a whole nother set of people.
Thank you. Mr. Fishbein.
Anxiety and depression and all of the other mental illnesses that, or situations that our students find themselves in are something that happens, I think, more and more because of the kind of world in which we live. So since that isn't going to change, it's something that as parents we need to be aware of, but also as a district, this district has taken quite a number of steps. We do have places students can drop in, and we also have counselors and social workers, not as many as I would like to see, to be blunt about it, where students can come and speak to someone. I don't think we have enough. It's, I think, more a money issue than a lack of desire. But the school has taken I think, a strong turn towards the mental well-being of our student population. We have, in the last, I guess it's a year or two now, we've put a social worker, a psychologist, and there's something else I'm missing, but basically 3 mental health workers in each of our buildings. And that is something that is an improvement, and hopefully we will be able to continue to improve on that as a district to address some of these needs. It's not going to fix it all, but it certainly is starting in the right direction.
Thank you. Mr. Mccann.
This is a topic that is becoming increasingly more prevalent and interesting in society today, especially with, school-age children. And I guess the sad fact is that it even occurs at a much younger age than people would like to even admit. I've had firsthand personal experience with it, and I see a lot of the youth, that work with me, and the load of responsibilities and duties and jobs and things they take on, the pressure of, say, as a 17, 18-year-old that college will bring on, can lead to a lot of anxiety. While I do know that a lot of times more hiring, if it's needed, I do not know the particular demand for more school psychologists or counselors if it's needed, but to me it's as important as hiring an extra teacher or administrator because it is so directly correlated to the safety of the kids, whether that's to themselves or, with things that you're going to be seeing in the news today. A lot of that, I believe, stems from issues like this. And it's something that should be treated extremely seriously. Any person or student that might have a physical disability is no different than somebody that might have severe anxiety or depression. It should be treated equally, and it should be treated with the utmost respect. And ultimately, for the student to know that they're accepted and that the resources are available to them. And again, if more of those need to be made available to them, then I think they should be. But for them to be comfortable in knowing that and that people are approachable and people can relate to them is extremely important, not only for their personal health and well-being, but for the others around them as well.
Thank you. And so we go to question number 10, and we're back at the top. Mr. Fishbein has the opportunity to go first this time. If you were going to cut $1 million from the school budget, what would you cut and why?
I would have to get that question. Where would I cut? I would take it out of one of the reserve funds so that it would not affect any of the programs that we have. I mean, if you come to a situation where you don't have enough funds and you have no other choice, and you're looking at your school system, we've built a really good system here. Like everything, it's not perfect. There are places that we could improve. And if we had another $1 million, we could find a place for it. And not a penny of it would be wasted. But if you have to cut $1 million because the government decides, the federal government or the state government decides that they're going to cut our allocation by $1 million, I think the best placed would be one of our reserve funds, because that way the students are not hurt. And hopefully, if it's just a one-year glitch, we'll be able to adjust going forward. There may be places that we could cut, but one of the places you don't want to cut is maintenance, because that's going to increase your costs overall. You don't want to stop replacing buses, because that increases your maintenance cost. This year there was a discussion about, do we bond electronics, some of the computers that we were going to buy. And, we had a discussion in the board about, do you bond something like that or not? We had decided not to bond it. We decided to pay for it out of our current budget, because it will cost less overall. Now, there were benefits to borrowing for it, but generally, because of the way in which this budget works, I have to go back to, if I'm going to cut $1 million, take it out of the reserve.
Thank you. Mr. Mccann.
Not having a ton of specific knowledge of the budget and how you might want to cut about 1% of it if you had to. I know the board kind of takes a macro look at a variety of different things, especially when it comes to the budget. However, in my experience with budgets, a lot of times if you need to kind of get your costs down or to kind of meet a certain goal, my hope would be you could take more of a micro look at things and kind of pick and choose from certain areas to collectively get to that mark. I do believe that's a tough question, because I know balancing a school budget is probably one of the more difficult things that even Jonathan does as a member of the board currently. But without any specific experience on working on the school budget, currently, I'd have to give kind of a broader answer in that regard, and cannot be more specific.
Thank you. Ms. Sampson.
Well, I did go to all of the budget presentations this cycle, and I know that we have put together a pretty conservative budget. I mean, it's pretty tight, and taking out of reserves doesn't seem to be like that's an answer. But what you might want to look at is skimming a little bit off of every single area so that everything is impacted a little bit. In a household budget, we cut out the frivolities. We don't go out to dinner. We don't buy new clothes. We don't turn up the heat. We turn down the heat in the winter, that sort of thing. A household budget is, well, granted, it's a lot different than a $100 million budget for a school. You would cut where you can and not have students suffer. You wouldn't cut, you probably wouldn't want to cut teacher salary. You probably wouldn't want to cut programming unless it was something that is kind of a pie-in-the-sky extra thing, which I don't believe we have that here. I think we've done, according to those presentations, it looked like we had a pretty lean, expectation. Yes, we're getting some much needed, furniture replaced in some of the buildings, but, desks are kind of needed. You can't have students falling on the floor. You can't have ceiling tiles falling on their heads. So I would look at a tiny bit off of each section of the budget.
Thank you. Our next question, number 11, goes to Mr. Mccann first. Please share the committee assignments and officer roles you plan to seek on the school board. What experience do you have that qualifies you for these assignment roles?
Well, I think if elected to the board, being able to contribute from a financial or budgetary perspective would be something that I can work very well with. Currently, I serve as the treasurer for a 501c3, and also obviously have a tremendous amount of knowledge with budgets and, that type of thing through running my own business for almost 11 years and from my previous work experience as well. It's something that has always just kind of made sense to me, that I work well with, and it's important to work well with the others in the group because there's a lot of things to consider. But I think in that regard, anything from the financial or budgetary aspects that the board is responsible for is something that I would also be a good fit for, given my current work experience.
Thank you. Ms. Sampson?
Okay. In my capacity serving on other boards, I've served in many different roles. I've been a secretary. I've been the president. I've been on parent committees. I've been on employment relations committees. So I have some experience in dealing with a lot of different types of personalities. I'm a people person. I'm not a money person. I would not be throwing my hand up to look at finances. That's not my specialty area. I'm much more of a people person. And I would seek out roles that get increased community involvement, look at teachers and looking at a lot of the more student-oriented committees. Those are the kinds of things that I would seek out personally myself.
Thank you. Mr. Fishbein?
I've sat on quite a number of boards, and I've served as both treasurer, secretary, and president. I've never been a vice president yet. And on the school board, I've been on the policy committee. I'm on the audit committee for the third year, and facilities committee this year. I was drawn to the audit committee because I have an accounting background and just a curious mind, and when you look at some of those audit reports, you really have to dig in. One of the things I like about them is that it's a check and balance, and it's one of the, I think one of the most important things that board members do is to make sure that the money that we spend, your money, is spent wisely, and that there are no holes where money bleeds out. So that if we're doing something right, or we're replacing something, if money comes into the district, it's properly accounted for. If it goes out, it's properly accounted for. And as far as, I can't speak about facilities because we're going to have our first meeting soon, I understand. But that is going to become important as we get into this, this $32 million bond project that we're doing. So what drew me to audit, I've mentioned, what drew me to policy is that I've dealt with policies at many different levels. It's something I do in my work now. And I like taking a look to see how we can make something better.
Thank you. And this is our last question. And we start with Ms. Sampson. In the next teachers' union contract, wait a minute. Okay. In the next teacher contract negotiation, what concessions would you want from the teachers' union and why?
Okay. I've been a teacher, and I've been part of a union, and I've been a teacher, and I've not been in a union. So I've taught in many different situations, having unions and not being part of a union. So this is a pretty tough question. I don't know what I would ask teachers to give back if I'm unaware of what they're getting. I mean, a negotiation is kind of just that. There has to be something presented, there has to be counteroffers, there's a little intrigue that goes on. So it's really hard to say. I know that as a union member in my current job, we've often been asked to give back. We've been asked to go on furlough pay, which means we basically work a few days out of the year with no pay, basically. And eventually, maybe in the next contract cycle, you get that money back. That's not something I think we would be asking teachers to do. I also wouldn't want to ask them to contribute more to their healthcare plan. But it's really hard not knowing, you know, what to say off the top of your head, what you would want teachers to give up when you don't know what the contract offer is. So personally, I mean, I wouldn't expect teachers to, you know, have to give up a lot. I mean, teachers work very hard. I mean, I'm not, and having been an educator, you know, that's not an easy question for me to answer, because I certainly, you know, would not expect teachers to give back salaries or anything like that.
Thank you.
I cannot answer this question ethically. If I answered it, it would remove me from any consideration of any teacher contract should I end up winning a second term on the board. This is the kind of thing that is left to the negotiators, and there's a reason why it's left to the negotiators. This is not something that is, I mean, I may have my own personal thoughts on it, but whatever they are completely irrelevant to the negotiation that the teachers have with the administration. At some point, the board would have to act on it, and frankly, I don't think it's a question that should be asked in this forum. And for that reason, I choose not to answer it.
I also agree it's a tougher question not knowing the specifics of the contract or what is up for negotiation upon renewal of a contract. However, in preparation for tonight, I did reach out to some folks at the teachers union, and I have also talked to some friends of mine that are have been within the district for a long time. And what I have learned is that the Bethlehem School District and their teachers union have a great open line of communication, and they've always worked very well together. And I don't know that you'd want either party to have to give anything back or make any concessions, but rather continue that open line of communication and continue to work well together to, you know, solve any issues that do arise between the two. And I unfortunately, I can't particularly say what any one party should concede to another.
Thank you very much. Just let me say thank you to all of you for coming and for listening to our candidates for this year, and for allowing me to be the moderator and make a few mistakes. We want to remind you that you can vote on May 21st at the annual school district vote and board election. The polls open at 7 a.m. and closes at 9 p.m. at the Bethlehem Central School. So I hope that all of you here will come out and vote and bring 5 or 6 people with you. This is very important that we vote. And now we're going to have, did you want to say something?
No, just to make sure you're doing the closing remarks.
No. I didn't leave them out. I just wanted to say what I had to say before I forget it, and then let them do their closing remarks. They each have 2 minutes, and I have to remind you that you also have 2 cards. That's 1 minute. So use it as you choose if you want to, okay? So before you went 1, 2, 3, you're the opposite. 3, 1, 2. Is that right?
3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
3, 2, yeah.
I went last, so I get to go first.
Right.
isn't it?
3, 2, 1. So go ahead.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So in closing, I hope that I've been able to highlight my strengths as a candidate. We had a lot of good questions tonight, things that, kind of were difficult to answer. I'm going to admit that. Being on the spot is not a specialty area. I try to think quickly, but I like to have time to study issues, and I like to have time to debate about things within my own self before I put forth answers, and you don't get that on the spot like this. So I did want to highlight another reason that I'm running, is that I'm continually inspired by the students here at Bethlehem. I already mentioned that I've been alarmed at the 20% of young adults facing mental health crises or issues or addictions. And I know that our community is not immune from these kinds of issues. I believe we should work to empower our students, beat those odds. I know we're considering a later start time for the high school. I know we're committing to goals to improve the wellness of our staff and students in our new strategic plan. One thing I think we could tweak maybe is the lunch schedule to ensure that if a high school student wants to have a lunch, they can, and not have to sacrifice a class, or not have to, be able to participate in a class that they want to participate in. So I think maybe we could tweak the schedule a little bit there. But if we're going to say that children are our future and we want to do what's best for our children, we should actually do what's best for our children and not what is convenient for the adults. Thank you.
Thanks again to everybody that came out. I know that taking time to listen to the three of us is something that's very important to you and has increasingly become rather important to me. I know as far as having a quote-unquote agenda or a reason to run for board, maybe I'm slightly out of the norm in that I don't have much of a agenda or a particular reason that I want to do it, more so that I just think it's important that a person kind of my background and whatnot is more, I'm just very open-minded and practical. And in talking with some friends that are employed within the district and some other community members, something like that can be an asset to a board, and I think I have that in spades. I've had a lot of experience within the community here. I have great relationships with the town of Bethlehem, a lot of members of the board, and the supervisor. I work closely with the Chamber of Commerce and a lot of other organizations within the schools. We've done a lot of charitable efforts with them and helped them raise either awareness or funds for different school projects and clubs and whatnot. And my biggest question for people when I was out, gaining some signatures and whatnot were, why did you want to do this? And mostly is that I think with what I've learned and having become such a large part of the community in my everyday business, I think that what I've learned and my interactions with all of the community could just be very beneficial to the board going forward. I know that at day one, becoming a board member is something brand new to me if I were to get elected. I know that you're not going to know everything on the first day and that it takes time to learn, and it takes a strong willingness to learn. And again, I believe that I possess those traits along with a very positive attitude that working as part of a team is more important than just my own opinion or knowledge. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters and to everyone that turned out. We all very much appreciate it. My first term on the board was as eye-opening as it was educational. My reasons for running for a second term have not changed from when I ran 3 years ago. I remain committed to maintaining academic excellence for all of our students, fostering an engaged citizenship among our youth, and importantly, continued fiscal responsibility with our tax dollars. I recognize the importance of education and feel very fortunate to have been involved in the decisions that affect our children and our community. With the potential of our fiscal landscape changing, and next year's budget is going to be more difficult than this one, I am dedicated to ensuring that public education is properly funded. I'm also running for re-election because I have more I want to accomplish. For example, I support the move to a later start time for our high school students. While the science is undeniable, like climate change, the question will be how to adopt to a new dynamic, a new schedule, while accommodating the needs and achieving buy-in from the many stakeholders affected. I will also continue to advocate the adoption of a conflict of interest policy that seeks to identify and prevent actual and perceived conflicts rather than to gloss over them. I'm excited by the prospect of serving another term on the board and hope you will trust me to do so. With those thoughts in mind, I respectfully request that on Tuesday, May 21st, you vote to support the budget and to re-elect me to another term on the board. Thank you.
That's right, we can applaud now, yeah. Thank you all very much. You can now chit-chat with the candidates if you like, and don't forget, the 21st, you're going to take yourself and 5 other people to the polls.